Hi everyone, hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to talk about something very exciting. As I'm recording this in early 2018, this is a huge buzzword, and that's smart contracts. Specifically, what I'm going to call smart legal contracts. We're going to talk today about what they are, how they work, whether or not they're going to replace someone like me and what I do in the world, and are they enforceable, and some other great things. First, let me tell you a few things about myself. My name is Braaten Cenkus. I'm a business attorney, a corporate attorney, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is specifically because it plays into smart contracts. My practice is mainly around mergers and acquisitions and capital raising, startups, partner founder, structuring, and a little bit of dispute work. And I've got a growing technology practice. So back around to today's topic, smart contracts or smart legal contracts. So the smart legal contract is not necessarily a term you'll hear a lot of, but I use it today to distinguish from smart contract code. So both these things are sometimes referred to as smart contract, and that's confusing. So smart contract code is the executable code that sits on top of a blockchain. And it's essentially a program running and interacting with the information on a blockchain. It's code, essentially, is what it is. Now, a smart legal contract is a particular application of that type of code. So that code can be used to form an organization, what's called a decentralized autonomous organization. It could be used to run an application, or it could be used, in our case, to actually facilitate a binding legal agreement, a legal contract. By legal contract, I mean an enforceable, binding agreement between two or more parties. Smart legal contracts are what we're talking about today. They're a type of contract that exists in the real world put onto the blockchain in codified or code form. Now, one of the things, let's talk about kind of specifically what they are. In 1996, Nick Szabo coined the term smart contract. And he was envisioning, the example he gave back then was a vending machine. He said, look, a vending machine is essentially a type of electronic contract. The offer, in legal terms, to a passerby is to put money in and get something in return, food or beverage. The acceptance is putting the money in. Offer and acceptance are two elements of a legally binding contract. And then the delivery, right, is the performance of the contract. That really has all the elements of an electronic contract. Very, very simple, but he explained why couldn't you take something like that and put that, in sort of software type of form, and that would be this smart contract. Why do we need that in a piece of paper? Well, here we are, fast forward, 22 years, and we've got the blockchain, which has a lot of potential to disrupt a lot of industries, and people are starting to play around with the application of these smart legal contracts. A better example, maybe you're hearing a lot about right now, smart contracts are expected to disrupt a lot of industries, particularly intermediaries in industries. So people who their role is just to sit in the middle of a transaction. A great use case is replacing an escrow agent. So right now, if you want to buy my watch, you call me, you say, I'll give you $100. I say, sure, send the money. And you say, well, no, send the watch. And I'll say, we've got a problem here. I don't trust you, you don't trust me. I'm assuming we don't know each other, not that you're a very good friend of mine, and then we've got a bigger problem if I don't trust you. But in that instance, there's a couple different things we could do. We could put together a binding contract. We could hire an escrow agent, and that escrow agent would serve a middleman kind of role, middlewoman role. And I would send the watch to the escrow agent, you would send the money, escrow agent would get both, and then distribute them. Well, that's expensive and it's time consuming and it can be expensive. So smart contracts could serve a really useful purpose in this context. On a smart contract, you could deposit your money, which in this case would be some type of cryptocurrency or Ether or Bitcoin or something like that. I would send you my watch. Perhaps it would tie in. This is essentially a software program, if you will. It could tie into a FedEx data feed to say that the watch was delivered. And then at that point automatically release your money to me. So there's a way to put that on the blockchain to take away or address the problem of trust or a lack of trust in the relationship. So a lot of people are talking about, I've read many articles, that this is finally the death of the corporate lawyers. Maybe depending on how you look at it, it's good for me. It's not our death quite yet. And for you, if you're sort of longingly waiting for it, you got a little while longer to wait. So let's look back at our escrow agreement. Yeah, that's a very simple agreement. Seems to work well. But what happens if the watch arrives and it doesn't work? Uh-oh. The smart contract all of a sudden got dumb, right? We now need to take a look at that situation and decide, well, what then? And if you don't send that watch back, we need remedies and mechanisms for going to get it. So there's always a lot of things that are going to take place, kind of offline, or at least in the foreseeable future. And really, there's a lot of those things if you think about it. But before I get into that, let's just talk about what people like I do, what business attorneys do. You might also call me a corporate lawyer or a transactional lawyer. There's maybe perception among some people that what we do is, a client calls and we say, okay, and we think about the best form and we go to get it and we just fill in a couple blanks and we ship it over to a client and, end of story, we pocket a lot of money. The vast majority of what I do, any sort of service agreement or customer contract or a merger and acquisition deal, that stuff's all custom work. There's a lot of time spent with the client thinking about what are we worried about, what are our risks here, what's important to you. And then I always start with a form, never a blank piece of paper, but it would be exceedingly rare that form would get changed a lot. And that change is what I get paid to do. And it's 20 years of practicing law, and I still learn things every day. So you hopefully get better and better at your craft, but we're professionals and experts at helping figure out how to write a contract to cover the situation, what's important to our clients. So that's what I do in the world. So now back to smart contracts. Will they replace what I do? Again, certainly not in the short term. So let's think about a couple of reasons why. Number one is, let's look at LegalZoom. LegalZoom has been around for 15 some odd years, 17, 18 years, been around for a while. Came out in the first sort of dot-com boom. And there was talk then that these will replace us. And it really hasn't eaten a whole lot into my practice. Again, for a non-disclosure agreement or something like that, it does the trick. But it really works for very simple transactions or very low budget transactions where people can't afford to do something different. And anything that's more complex, which again is the vast majority of things that come across my desk, or where my client has any amount of budget, they're going to want to do some custom work and to think about and have something, a bespoke contract. So that's not going to change. Blockchain in the foreseeable future is really going to be for sort of simple use cases. That's number one. Number two, just because you have a contract and you've got some blanks and it's easy to fill in, doesn't mean what you put in there is enforceable. So for example, let's say you go to LegalZoom and you order a promissory note. And you lend $10,000 to a friend, and you plug in there, here's the interest rate, and here's how it's going to be paid back, and here's my security, and here's what happens if it doesn't tell you that the things that you put in that contract will be enforceable. For example, what's the maximum rate you could charge without it being usury, without it being illegal? Can you charge a prepayment penalty? Will the prepayment penalty be treated as interest? If they pay off quickly, should that be added in to calculate interest for purposes of usury? If you have security, how will that be written up so as to be enforceable? So again, there are plenty of things you can DIY. This isn't about having to come to me for absolutely everything, but there's a lot of stuff that is not, right? Including most types of contracts and then specifically things that go in those contracts. A third big reason that I'm here for a while longer is that there's always arguments around enforceability and things like that. Business contracts are replete with language that's squishy and subjective, like reasonable or best efforts or good faith. These are not things that can be codified, right? That's not a standard that you can have a computer program decide if it was met. And it's intentional. We build that in because we can't think of every single situation that would define acceptable performance. So we say reasonable performance, or we're trying in good faith to accomplish something. These things are meant to be analyzed after the fact. Not necessarily by a business lawyer all the time. You don't want all your contracts to need to be interpreted to determine if they're enforceable, but the parties. Right? So if you've got a contract, if I got a contract that says you'll send me that watch, if I buy your watch, you'll send me the watch within a reasonable amount of time after receiving my money. Let's say that's the deal. Well, what's a reasonable amount of time? Well, Just depends. But it's meant to say if you get sick and it takes you a few more days, I can't sue you, right? I mean, it's meant to be interpreted in the overall context of things. And that's not going to change. And people are going to need advice about, was this proper? So in today's world, LegalZoom has done me a favor in certain ways, which is things that are very routine. I'm not really that interested in taking someone's money for it. Number one, I get paid hourly, or even on projects, I scope how much time I'm going to put into it. So if I just really had to grab a form and put in a name and send it, there's not any real money on it anyway. I would feel badly charging someone something more. Like, I'm happy that world, sort of that easy world is more accessible for my clients. That's great. It frees a couple dollars up for them to do other things and for me to work on sort of more high value transactions. So the way this is all going is that it's no longer about the paper. That's not where my value is. You can have my forms. I don't care. In fact, Orrick Harrington is a big West Coast startup technology. They've got law firm, and they've got a huge technology practice. And their forms for startups are free on their website. You can go and get bylaws and a certificate of formation and an option plan. They don't care. That stuff's out there. The value they provide is advice, telling you if that's the right form to use, what needs to change. Any lawyer who's still sort of guarding their forms like they're precious and that's where the value is missing where this thing is going. That stuff's all out there, and it still doesn't make me any, less useful, but it makes my role different. So there's other talk about these smart contracts and whether or not they're even enforceable. So let's talk just for a second about, are smart contracts enforceable? And my answer is yes, okay? As any good lawyer, I'm going to qualify just a little bit, but yeah, there's no reason not to expect a smart contract typically to be enforceable. Now, the elements of a contract, the major ones are an offer by one party, an acceptance by the other party, something called consideration, which is kind of a weird esoteric term, but the reason you see sometimes someone selling something for $1 or $10, they're transferring a piece of real estate for $10. Well, no one, the real estate's got to be worth more than $10. What's going on is they're giving it to the person, but they're putting consideration into the document. Those are the main elements. There's mutuality of obligation. There's some other things. Sometimes it has to be in writing, but rarely, but sometimes. So these are the things that make a contract. Those are all, a smart contract is really no different. The form of it, right? Whether it's written, whether it's a physical piece of paper I'm holding in my hand, whether it's on the computer in the form of a PDF, or whether it's coded on a blockchain, it doesn't change. Okay? In the short term, I think because the use cases for these smart contracts are going to be so niche. So most examples, there could be a piece of the transaction that takes place on the blockchain, but other things will have to take place off. And there's a term, if you do more research into this, called an oracle. These smart contracts are going to be part of a broader transaction. That transaction, ideally, in today's world, before federal legislation makes it more clear, you'd want it to be clear. We have a contract, offer and acceptance, consideration, those things. So I don't think that means it renders the smart contract useless because you need a piece of sort of physical paper or PDF or something. It's going to be needed anyway to kind of put the whole context around the transaction, of which the smart contract will be just one piece. So in that, you'd have some of those elements that today may be a little bit hard for a court who's looking at this after the fact to decide. Was there offer and acceptance on this thing? Now, really soon, the law is going to take care of that. There's going to be changes. I can guarantee it's like e-signatures. For a while there, I would hear people writing online and talking about these aren't enforceable. There's no law to enforce them. Look, they were. Most courts would have enforced those even before the digital signature legislation and all that. Could there be some risk? Some judge who doesn't understand it throwing it out? Sure. Or some judge who wants to rule against enforcing that contract for some other reason, equitable reasons, sort of real world reasons that drive decisions. Yeah, that could happen too. But generally speaking, if a court gets this thing, it's obvious the parties agreed to do something, it was just part of the execution took place on the blockchain, that's going to be enforceable. Again, I expect some federal legislation to come out, kind of like it did with the digital signatures, to just take care of and put the issue to rest once and for all, so we don't all have to debate or worry about weird corner cases. But I wouldn't be worried about being out on the bleeding edge with clients. I'm not worried today about doing things in the smart contract space. Depending on the size of the transaction, right? I mean, if my client's making a $10 million investment into someone, well, I might just say like that might not be the best use case for something very cutting edge, right? Maybe you see where I'm going with it. I mean, there might be circumstances in which you say it just doesn't make sense, but generally speaking, they're enforceable. They will be enforceable. There's no question. By the time we get to doing things that are more fulsome, like larger transactions and things, there's no question this issue will be covered over. So I'm really curious what you think about this. If you have thought about trying to use smart contracts, if you're a lawyer and you're listening to this, what are you thinking about? One thing that I'm wondering a lot is where this all goes. Do you think that every lawyer is going to need to code? Do you think that the coders are all going to need to be sort of armchair lawyers? Are they just going to be working together and every law firm is going to have a huge IT department? Where do you think the world is going with this? Or do you think it's more hype than promise? I think it's more promise than hype when it comes to smart legal contracts, even though there's a ton of hype. I just think it remains to be seen how it's all going to unfold. But I want to hear from you. So drop a comment, send me an email. You can find me at cenkuslaw.com. Thanks for tuning in today and appreciate it.